People scanning something on the back of their right hand against terminals beginning late spring of this year, 2026. I was shown in the plainest language I have. A new illness is coming, beginning late spring of this year, 2026. 3 cities simultaneously: Memphis, Phoenix, Sacramento. Memphis, Phoenix, Sacramento. But first, you need to understand the timeline. He gestured toward one of the frozen images, a news broadcast visible behind a government official at a podium. A calendar was partially visible on a wall in the background. Late spring, he said. That is when it begins.
Emergency alert on March 21st that this virus was coming, and listen very carefully to what I say. To scare you unnecessarily, if you're not a politician or a priest or a traitor, but I'm telling you now that I'm asking you to, and I'm serious about this. Prepare. If you haven't already, prepare. I'm talking about have a plan. I'm talking about off grid, totally off grid. Okay, they're probably going to roll out another version of COVID-19 with and it's going to happen around at the same time the economies are collapsing intentionally from Trump's mad pointless war. I'm afraid. So the timeline is going to be, if there's going to be a virus, you're probably going to hear about it around about spring, summer. Certainly, as we approach winter, it's going to be too late. You need to make plans now, and also you're not going to survive on your own. Well, you might do, but you're going to have to help each other. So this is it's only going to be those of you who are aware that there's a mark of the beast, that there's a digital ID, that there's a big agenda afoot that are going to escape this, okay? And like I say, it's going to be mandatory enforcement, and you're probably going to end up with a sort of a quantum dot type chip in your right hand, which will also modify or moderate your behaviour. Don't take it whatever you do, okay? Because they're targeting your connection with me. Not me as in Bruce Brown incarnate, but my almighty and all-knowing form. So they're trying to sever the relationship between man and God, because they are absolutely obsessed with them being your God.
You could take it and put it on a shelf or whatever, but I felt in my heart it was serious. It was serious enough to tell you all, and I thought it was cool because Trump was behind the pulpit. He was behind the podium talking. It wasn't Biden, and so that was interesting. And it was in the spring again. I could tell you this. I could see the leaves on the trees coming out again. and it was just like it was whenever they locked everything down with COVID in the spring, and they were doing it again.
Don't accept them, but they're so desperate to be your God. Just letting you know.
For years, I thought the mark of the beast would be something obvious, a clear sign, something forced on people who could simply refuse it. I believed, like many do, that as long as you stayed alert and said no, you would be safe. That belief was wrong. What most people think about the mark is not true, and Jesus showed me why. I'm Michael, 45 years old, and 3 weeks ago I died in a military hospital. I'm looking for those who know my voice so intimately that they can distinguish truth from deception even when they can't explain why.
Then contact tracing, digital monitoring, movement tracking. Each stage will be presented as temporary, as a reasonable, necessary measure in response to an extraordinary situation. That is when the infrastructure gets built. That is when the systems that will later be used for something else entirely get normalized. Each individual step will seem defensible, he said. It is only when you hold them all together and look at where they lead that the destination becomes clear. And most people will not hold them all together because they will be too frightened and too exhausted to see the pattern. He gestured and the officials disappeared, replaced by images of ordinary daily life in what looked like 6 months from now. People holding phones to scanners at building entrances, holding out wrists for temperature sensors, standing in marked positions on floors. The technology required for all of this already exists, he explained. It has been in development for years under other justifications. This situation simply provides the rationale for deployment. By summer, the basic framework will be in place in every major metropolitan area. By autumn, it will be normalized. By winter, it will be mandatory. And the mark, I said. I had grown up in a household where Revelation was read seriously, though my medical training had gradually moved those concerns to a shelf in my mind where I placed things I had not resolved. His expression shifted into something heavier. That comes in winter, most likely, when enough people have lost someone close to them, when the fear has been sustained long enough to become the baseline emotional state of the population. That is when they will present the solution. The scene changed again. I was looking at something that appeared at first to be a vaccination clinic, but the procedure being performed was different. People were receiving something implanted rather than injected, small enough that it was barely visible. The procedure, completed in under 30 seconds. They will present it as a medical breakthrough, he said. A quantum identification chip that monitors your health indicators in real time, verifies your immunization status, prevents transmission. One simple procedure, and you have access restored. You can work, shop, move freely. Everything returns to normal.
At soup kitchens, thought the mark of the beast would be something obvious, a clear sign, something forced on people who could simply refuse it. I believed, like many do, that as long as you stayed alert and said no, you would be safe. That belief was wrong. What most people think about the mark is not true, and Jesus showed me why. Flowing across continents, like he said. His voice carried the weight of absolute truth. What's coming in 2026 isn't what most people expect. The mark they've been warned about won't arrive with obvious evil. It will come disguised as salvation, as progress, as the only reasonable choice in a world falling apart. The vision zoomed in on cities across America and Europe. I saw massive lines of people waiting outside buildings that looked like medical facilities. But there was something off about the atmosphere, a desperation in the air that felt manufactured, orchestrated. News broadcasts played on screens everywhere, showing reports of a new global health crisis, something that made previous pandemics look like minor inconveniences. The solution being offered was elegant in its simplicity. A biotechnological implant that would monitor health in real time, prevent disease before it started, and eliminate the need for traditional medicine. Government officials and health experts praised it as humanity's greatest achievement. Religious leaders from various faiths endorsed it as a gift from God, a tool to end suffering. But Jesus showed me what was really happening beneath the surface. Each implant contained nanotechnology that did far more than monitor health. Once activated, it began rewriting neural pathways, subtly altering the way people processed spiritual truth. It didn't erase their memories or change their personalities overnight. The transformation was gradual, almost imperceptible. I watched people who had been passionate believers become increasingly indifferent to prayer. Their Bibles gathered dust. Church felt obligatory rather than life-giving. They still identified as Christians, still held theological positions, but something fundamental had shifted. The connection between their soul and the divine had been severed, cut as cleanly as a surgical incision. "This is what breaks my heart," Jesus said, and I could hear genuine anguish in his voice. They won't realize what they've lost until it's too late. The implant doesn't announce itself as the mark. It presents itself as wisdom, as caring for your family, as being a responsible citizen. I saw families torn apart by the decision. Parents who refused the implant watching their children accept it willingly. Spouses divided over whether this was the prophesied mark or simply advanced medicine. Churches splitting down the middle as some pastors endorsed it while others warned against it. And his attention focused entirely on me. The mark isn't just about technology. It's about allegiance. It's about whether people trust in human systems or in me. Those who truly know my voice will recognize the deception. But those who have only known me intellectually, who have treated faith as fire insurance rather than relationship, they will be vulnerable. How do we resist? I asked, finally finding my voice. How do we help people see the truth when the deception is so sophisticated? He smiled, though sadness lingered in his eyes. That's exactly what I'm going to show you. But first, you need to understand the timeline. The vision shifted again, and I saw calendar pages flipping forward. February, March, April of 2026. The implant rollout would begin slowly, targeting healthcare workers and government employees first. By summer, it would be mandatory for most employment. By fall, those without it would find themselves unable to buy food, access banking, or participate in society in any meaningful way. But Jesus showed me something else. Something that filled me with hope even as the darker visions continued. Scattered across every nation were pockets of believers who had been preparing, not with weapons or bunkers, but with something far more powerful. They had learned to hear his voice with crystal clarity. They had built communities based on genuine love, rather than religious obligation. They had practiced living with less, depending on him for provision rather than on systems that could be weaponized against them. These are my remnant, he said. These are the ones who will not just survive what's coming, but will shine like lights in the darkness, and you're going to help prepare others to join them. The vision began to fade, but his words continued echoing through dimensions I couldn't fully comprehend. Everything I was about to show him felt urgent, critical, like information that needed to be branded into my consciousness before I returned. What came next would challenge everything I thought I understood about spiritual warfare and practical resistance. The training ground Jesus revealed next wasn't what I expected. No military drills, no survival tactics. Instead, he showed me something that looked deceptively simple but contained layers of spiritual warfare I'd never considered. "Watch how my faithful ones are being prepared right now," he said, gesturing toward scenes unfolding across the globe. "They don't realize they're in boot camp for what's coming." I witnessed a single mother in Ohio struggling to pay her electric bill. She had just enough money for either electricity or groceries, not both. As I watched her kneel in her tiny apartment, praying with tears streaming down her face, something shifted in the spiritual realm. Her pantry, which had been nearly empty, suddenly contained enough food for 2 weeks, not magically appearing, but through a series of impossibly timed events. A neighbor knocked with extra groceries from a bulk purchase. A co-worker remembered she owed her money from months ago. A church food bank called about unclaimed donations. "This is how I'm teaching them to trust me completely," Jesus explained. "Every financial crisis, every impossible situation, every moment where human logic says there's no solution, I'm building their faith muscles for the greater trials ahead." The scene shifted to a businessman in Seattle who had just lost his job. He had a family to support, a mortgage to pay, and the implant mandate was being rolled out at every company where he applied. I watched him wrestle with the decision night after night. His wife pleaded with him to just accept it so they could keep their home. His children didn't understand why Daddy was being difficult about a simple medical procedure. But something inside him recognized the spiritual weight of the decision. He couldn't articulate it theologically. He just knew, with a certainty that transcended logic. True battle isn't fought with swords or violence. It's fought through influence, through whispers, through the slow erosion of truth until lies become indistinguishable from reality. I saw corporate boardrooms where executives made decisions about the implant technology, but behind each chair stood entities I could only describe as shadows with intention. They didn't force anyone's hand or override free will. Instead, they simply amplified existing desires for profit, control, efficiency. A businessman's natural ambition became consuming greed. A politician's desire for order became tyrannical obsession. A scientist's curiosity became blind ambition. "This is how the enemy always operates," Jesus explained. "He takes what I created as good and twists it just enough to serve his purposes." Technology itself isn't evil. But when humanity places ultimate trust in their own innovations rather than in me, those tools become weapons against their own souls. The vision shifted to show me churches where this same principle was playing out. Pastors stood in pulpits with similar shadows behind them, not controlling their words but magnifying their fears. Fear of seeming irrelevant, fear of losing congregants, fear of financial instability. These anxieties, perfectly natural and understandable, became the very mechanisms through which compromise entered. I watched one minister wrestling with whether to preach against the implants. His heart knew the truth, but the shadow behind him amplified every doubt. What if you're wrong? What if you cause unnecessary panic? What if families leave and the church closes? What about your mortgage, your children's college funds, your retirement? See how the enemy doesn't need to plant new thoughts, Jesus said. He only needs to magnify the ones already present until they drown out my voice. But then he showed me something that filled me with fierce hope. The faithful remnant had shadows too, different ones. Angels stood behind believers who chose obedience despite the cost, and their presence didn't amplify fears or desires. Instead, they whispered truth directly into spirits that had learned to listen. You're not alone. He's been faithful before. This temporary suffering is achieving eternal glory. Remember whose you are. The contrast was staggering. Both sides had supernatural assistance, but one amplified human weakness, while the other strengthened divine connection. The difference between damnation and salvation often came down to which voice someone had trained themselves to hear. "David," Jesus said, turning to face me directly, "this is what I need you to understand about the November mandate. It's not primarily about technology or government control. Those are merely tools. The real battle is and has always been about worship. Who will humanity ultimately trust when everything else fails?" He showed me the moment of decision thousands would face in airport terminals. The choice appeared simple on the surface. Get the implant and continue your life, or refuse and face immediate consequences. But in the spiritual realm, each decision carried cosmic weight. When someone extended their hand to receive the mark, I watched their guardian angel step back, grief evident even in their otherworldly features. The individual didn't feel any different immediately. No dramatic change occurred, but the connection between their soul and heaven grew thinner, like a rope fraying one strand at a time. Those who refused, however, experienced something remarkable. The instant they said no, despite every logical reason to comply, their guardian angel drew closer. The connection to the divine realm strengthened visibly. And something else happened that took my breath away. Other angels appeared, not assigned to that individual, but drawn by their act of faithfulness. I watched as a young mother refused the implant despite her husband's pleading, despite her children crying, despite airport security threatening arrest. The moment she stood firm, a dozen angels surrounded her family, forming a protective barrier that the shadows couldn't penetrate. "This is why I tell you to fear not," Jesus said. "Those who lose their life for my sake will find it." Every sacrifice made in faithfulness draws more of heaven's resources to that person's aid. But the vision grew darker as he showed me what was coming after the airport mandate. The implants were merely phase one of a system designed to separate humanity into two distinct groups, those connected to the network and those outside it.
Hey, good morning, family. How are y'all doing? I have a video I'm going to tell you all about a dream I had 2 nights ago. And so this is how the dream goes. I'll just get right to it. I don't want to waste your time. In the dream, I was sleeping in my dream. And I wake up in my dream, and I'm looking out my window at my house, and I pick up my phone, and I see all these news bulletins on my phone from YouTube and friends, people trying to tell me what was going on. And I go and I look at my phone, and I start seeing that there is a major announcement by the United States government. And I see the president, but in this dream, it's President Trump again. And President Trump is holding a podium with the presidential seal on this podium. And he starts talking, and he has a blue suit on with a white shirt and a red tie.
And we're prepared, and we're doing a great job with it, and it will go away. Just stay calm. Be calm. It's really working out, and a lot of good things are going to happen. It's very much, we hope, under control. We have a lot of people, a lot of great people are studying it. It should be fine. We hope.
Again, just like he always has, usually wears, But he was very somber in his face. And he said, my fellow Americans, basically, he says, I have an announcement to make. There's another virus. And he starts explaining to everybody that this virus is basically a new virus that is going to dwarf COVID, that made COVID look like it was a wimpy virus compared to what this new virus is. The death ratio was skyrocketing even more higher than COVID did. It was interesting. And he was making an announcement that we were going on lockdowns again. Instantaneously, I felt like, oh no, this is what I saw. in my dream, I'm thinking this. This is what the Lord showed me. This is the virus that I've warned you all about. And here it is. Here it comes. And I was thinking, in the dream, I'm not prepared enough. I need to get more supplies. He was calling for a major lockdown. He was calling for no flights, international, coming in or going out. He was telling everybody that we were going on another lockdown, like an extended lockdown for 20 some days to stop spread, because there were some cases in America that were here, and it was up north, east, and that he was taking the precautions as to lock everything down because of what was happening overseas. And so people were perishing, like I told you all, and they were they were obese people. I'm not sure, I just remember watching the news in the dream, and then when he made the announcement that we were going on lockdowns again in the dream, people panicked. And they were hitting the grocery stores, they were hitting the Walmart superstores, all of it, and they were wiping stuff out, like buying everything, that they could get their hands on in the dream, like almost like people were in a panic because of what they had lived already. They were already knowing what was coming, so people were acting crazy in the grocery stores, not just about toilet paper this time. It was about everything, chips, whatever they could get their hands on, buying it and filling their buggies and whatever families were. It was that way for everything. And I remember in the dream, watching the news in the dream, it was such a weird dream. With all the major news networks talking about this is a new virus, this is a new pandemic, and it dwarfs COVID, and they kept saying that in their speech. The death toll ratio is going to dwarf COVID, and basically that was the dream. But I just remember feeling uneasy in my dream because of what the Lord had showed me prophetically already prior to the dream, warning you all. And so it was not a very, it was very eerie. So I just wanted to come on and tell you all that. I wanted to, I know it's not that, you probably say, oh, it was just a dream. I don't have dreams like that. I'm just telling you all, when the Lord talks to me, I know it. When I wake up and I remember things, and he's speaking to me through that, it's like, here it is again. I'm warning you. And so, I just felt, I almost didn't even say anything about it, but I just felt like I should. Like I said, I'm a watchman. If you think this is pizza and you like I had some bad food that night, bad Chinese food or something, but the night before, which I don't eat that anyway, but you could take it and put it on a shelf or whatever. But I felt in my heart it was serious. It was serious enough to tell you all. And I thought it was cool because Trump was behind the pulpit. He was behind the podium talking. It wasn't Biden. And so that was interesting. And it was in the spring again. I could tell you this. I could see the leaves on the trees coming out again. And it was just like it was whenever they locked everything down with COVID in the spring. And they were doing it again.
Miracles or souls in my world. I died. My name is Dr. Eris Thorne. I am an epidemiologist, and the moment my heart stopped, I found myself face to face with Jesus. He warned me of something urgent. A new virus is coming, and time is running out.
My name is Dr. Sarah Davis. I am 50 years old, a board-certified internist with 23 years of practice in Charlotte, North Carolina. For most of my life, I lived each day the way many people do, assuming that if you work hard, stay reasonable, and keep faith somewhere in the background, everything important will eventually make sense on its own. I delivered difficult diagnoses, held the hands of dying patients, and trusted science to explain everything that mattered. I am telling you this so you understand exactly who is speaking when I say that what happened to me 4 days ago was not a hallucination, not a stress response, not a neurological event born from oxygen deprivation. It was the most real thing I have ever experienced in my life, and I would stake every credential I have ever earned on that statement. March 8th, a Sunday afternoon. I had spent the morning at church, then come home to work in the garden behind my house. I find it meditative, the garden. After a week of rounds and charts and the particular weight that comes from watching people suffer, there is something grounding about putting your hands in soil. My backyard is modest, a vegetable plot. March 8th. It kills differently, and the response will be worse than the disease itself. We passed through walls and doors as though they were suggestions rather than barriers. In one room, a family stood around a bed in full protective equipment, their faces invisible behind layers of plastic and cloth. The person in the bed was not moving. In another, a team worked with the specific frantic energy of people who know they are losing and refuse to accept it. I know that energy from the inside. I have been part of teams that looked exactly like that. Why are you showing me this? My voice cracked in a way that had nothing to do with cold water. I am one doctor in one city. I treat hypertension and diabetes and the ordinary accumulation of damage that living does to bodies over time. He turned to face me fully, and the weight of his complete attention was something I felt physically, like the pressure change before a major weather system arrives. The specialists and the administrators, he said, they will complicate it. They will form committees. They will issue guidance documents while people die in hallways. But you have spent 23 years watching patients and reading the signs that appear before the obvious symptoms. You know when something is wrong before the numbers confirm it. You know when to act before consensus forms. They will offer safety in exchange for compliance. It will seem reasonable at first, logical, even necessary. A new identification system, they will say, for public health, for the protection of the community, for the greater good. His voice carried something I had not heard in it before, a kind of grief that went deeper than any ordinary sorrow. Millions will accept it without question. They will believe the lie because the alternative requires more courage than they feel they have. How do we stop it? I asked. You do not stop it. You prepare for it. You warn the ones who are willing to listen. The scene around us accelerated, images moving through the air around us like frames from a film being shuffled. Churches with chains on their doors, families being separated at checkpoints staffed by personnel in uniforms I did not recognize as belonging to any current agency. People scanning something on the back of their right hand against terminals in order to receive groceries, medicine, access to buildings. People without the mark sitting behind chain link fencing in facilities that did not look like any official detention center I had ever seen pictures of. This is what comes if they choose wrong, he said. But Sarah, here is what you need to understand most clearly. The virus is not the real test. The response to the virus is the real test. It is what people will agree to accept when they are frightened enough and exhausted enough and desperate enough for things to feel normal again. We stopped moving. The images hung around us like a diorama. I am going to show you more, he said. Specific details that will matter as events unfold. But first, you need to understand the timeline. He gestured toward one of the frozen images, a news broadcast visible behind a government official at a podium. A calendar was partially visible on a wall in the background. Late spring, he said. That is when it begins. Late spring of 2026. I watched him indicate the date and felt something drop through me that had nothing to do with cold water. You have less time than you think. The signs are already present for those who know how to read diagnostic indicators before they become undeniable. The frozen images began moving again, slowly at first. I saw laboratories, scientists in full protective gear moving samples between facilities with a specific urgency that indicates they already know what they have found. They will implement the response in stages, he continued. Mandatory testing first at borders, airports, public buildings. People will accept that without significant resistance. They have done it before. Then contact tracing, digital monitoring. His expression shifted into something heavier. That comes in winter, most likely. When enough people have lost someone close to them, when the fear has been sustained long enough to become the baseline emotional state of the population, that is when they will present the solution. The scene changed again. I was looking at something that appeared at first to be a vaccination clinic, but the procedure being performed was different. People were receiving something implanted rather than injected, small enough that it was barely visible. The procedure, completed in under 30 seconds. They will present it as a medical breakthrough, he said. A quantum identification chip that monitors your health indicators in real time, verifies your immunization status, prevents transmission. One simple procedure, and you have access restored. You can work, shop, move freely. Everything returns to normal. For most people, that will be enough. The hunger for normalcy will be stronger than the resistance to compliance. But it is not only a health device. No. His voice carried absolute certainty, the kind I associate with a diagnosis made on irrefutable evidence. Once it is in place, it does more than monitor. It influences. It alters something fundamental in the way a person accesses the spiritual dimension of their existence. Those who accept it with full knowledge of what they are choosing, that is when a line is crossed that cannot be uncrossed. That is when the decision becomes permanent in a way that physical death is not. I thought of Revelation then with a clarity I had never had reading it as text. The technology makes it possible. The fear makes it acceptable. The enforcement makes it feel unavoidable. But the spiritual consequence, that is the part that will not appear on any consent form. The clinic faded, replaced by something that disturbed me more than the hospitals or the checkpoints. I was looking at people, thousands of them, living their ordinary lives, working, eating, moving through routines. But their eyes held a quality I recognized from neurology consultations. A flatness, an absence of the particular light that indicates someone is present behind the face. They were performing the functions of living without whatever it is that makes living something more than a biological process. Like watching the lights on in a building where nobody is home. This is what acceptance costs, he said quietly. Not only freedom of movement or control over the body, the capacity to hear my voice, the ability to feel. Conviction. The possibility of choosing differently. The chip does not merely surveil and restrict, it severs, permanently. Then how do people avoid it? I asked. That is what I am going to show you. But Sarah, understand this first. Avoiding it is not passive. It is not simply refusing and then waiting for things to resolve. It requires action taken before the enforcement becomes total. Preparation made before the options close. There are specific locations, he said, where my protection will be strongest, where communities can sustain themselves entirely outside the systems that will require the mark. I am going to show you 5 states, 5 regions where the faithful can gather and endure what is coming. Why 5 specifically? Because that is what is needed. More would dilute the protection across too wide an area. Fewer would concentrate too many people in too small a space. These 5 have the geography, the resources, and the spiritual covering necessary to shelter those who refuse. Montana first. And suddenly I was perceiving it not merely as terrain, but as layered information, climate patterns, water sources, timber, population density, and over all of it something that in my mind I could only describe as a dome of covering, the northwestern corner near the Canadian border. Towns so small most Americans could not place them on a map. Libby, Eureka, Troy. The wilderness there provides what the system will be unable to replicate or control. Game, clean water, timber, and communities that have never stopped knowing how to live without depending on supply chains that can be switched off. I watched families arriving, purchasing land that by conventional metrics appeared to have no value, too remote, too harsh, too far from anything called civilization. That remoteness was precisely the point. The window for getting there is before summer ends, he continued. Once autumn arrives, enforcement accelerates. Travel questions get asked. Movement gets flagged. But in these weeks and months right now, people can still move freely if they choose to move decisively. The vision shifted to Wyoming, the Eastern Plains region near the Montana border, Sheridan, Buffalo, Gillette, the kind of open landscape that most people drive through on their way to somewhere else. That openness provides something that denser areas cannot. Low population density means fewer enforcement resources deployed, less surveillance infrastructure, more room to build something genuinely independent. I saw settlements forming in valleys I had no names for, families arriving and immediately beginning to build infrastructure designed to function without connection to any system that could be leveraged for compliance. Solar generation that would not appear on utility records. Water from wells that did not depend on municipal treatment. Gardens scaled for genuine sustenance rather than supplemental hobby farming. These communities will not be hiding, he explained. They will be living openly, but entirely outside the commercial and governmental systems that will require the mark to access. When ordinary commerce becomes unavailable for those who refuse, these communities will already have been operating on different foundations for months. Barter, mutual exchange, the economic forms that functioned for centuries before digital control became possible. But authorities will try to shut them down, I said. Force compliance. They will try, which is precisely why the spiritual covering matters as much as the physical preparation. These locations are not arbitrary, Sarah. My hand rests on them. There is angelic protection over these territories, not protection from all difficulty, but protection that ensures the faithful endure through the difficulty. Idaho appeared next in the vision, its northern panhandle region carrying that same quality of golden radiance I had seen over the Montana locations. Bonner's Ferry, Sandpoint, the outer regions, mountains and forests that create natural barriers, while the communities in those areas already understand and value what independence from centralized systems actually requires. Idaho will reach capacity fastest because it is already known as a destination for people who want distance from government overreach. By late summer, awareness will have spread enough that land prices will spike sharply. Those who wait will either pay far more than necessary or find nothing available at any price. He showed me how these 3 states form a connected triangle of protection: Montana, Wyoming, Idaho. Close enough that communities within them can trade resources, share information, provide support to each other across the distances. When urban supply chains collapse and cities begin to starve, these farms will be producing abundance. The contrast will be stark. The agricultural vision shifted to something I had not anticipated: ocean, tropical vegetation, the particular quality of light that belongs to the mid-Pacific. Hawaii, he said. But it depends entirely on shipping, I said, for everything. How is that a refuge? The isolation is precisely the point. When the mainland descends into total enforcement, Hawaii's distance creates a barrier that is difficult for authorities to fully manage. The ocean that makes it logistically vulnerable also makes it logistically complicated to control. I watched small communities establishing themselves on the outer islands, not Oahu with its military installations and urban concentration, but Kauai, Big Island's remote regions, Molokai. People positioning themselves away from the infrastructure of centralized power. Those who choose Hawaii must arrive entirely self-sufficient, he said, with enough supplies and knowledge to sustain themselves while they establish what they need to survive indefinitely. The ocean protects, but it also makes retreat impossible. You commit to the islands. You make them work. He showed me all 5 regions simultaneously then: 2 mountain states, 2 plains states, 1 island chain. Thousands of miles of geography separating them, but connected by the same spiritual covering. These are the places, he said, not the only places where the faithful will survive, but the strongest concentrations of my protection. The communities built there will maintain their faith. They will endure the tribulation. They will emerge. And people simply need to go there, pack their lives and move? Those who have the means and ability, yes. But Sarah, hear this carefully. His tone shifted into something more intense than anything I had heard from him yet. Location is not salvation. I am showing you these places because they offer practical advantages and because my hand rests on them. But I have sustained my people in the middle of hostile empires before. The Israelites in Egypt, marked by blood on the doorframe while death moved through their streets. Daniel in Babylon, maintaining everything that mattered while serving under a system that required compromise in every direction. Early Christians in Roman catacombs, worshiping in the dark while the empire hunted them. Believers in Soviet labor camps, clinging to Christ after everything else had been stripped away. My protection follows faith, not coordinates. Those who can reach the refuge states, go. But those who cannot, those who are called to remain exactly where they are, I will not abandon. Some will be sustained by provision that cannot be explained by anything the surrounding system can account for. Others will seal their testimony with their lives and receive the crown that goes to those who hold faith when holding it costs everything. Both paths lead to me. The weight of everything he was saying accumulated in a way I felt physically, even in that state. This was not crisis management advice. This was preparation for the final examination of everything I had claimed to believe since childhood, and then spent 2 decades gradually placing in a secondary position behind evidence-based medicine and the satisfaction of being competent at something difficult. How much time? I asked. The vision shifted to something like an accelerated calendar. March, giving way to April, giving way to May. The progression was not leisurely. Months, he said, not years, not decades. What you witnessed will begin unfolding this spring. By summer, the collapse will be undeniable to anyone paying attention. By fall, the choice will be forced upon people. Those who wait for certainty before acting will find that certainty arrives precisely when the options have already closed. I thought about my practice. My patients, many of whom I have been treating for 15 years. The clinic I built with 2 partners over a decade and a half. The apartment I own. The careful, orderly life I have constructed around the work that has defined me. All of it, suddenly visible to me as scaffolding, useful, temporary structure that had been quietly substituting for something more permanent. What about the people who will think I have simply had a near-death experience that produced the kind of vivid narrative the brain generates under extreme stress? I have thought that about my own patients who told me similar things. That is between them and me, he said. Your responsibility is to deliver what you were shown with complete fidelity. Some will hear it and act. Most will dismiss it until circumstances make them remember your words, precisely when the easy choices are no longer available. The refuge regions appeared before me again, each one carrying that quality of light that indicated something more than ordinary geography. But now, I could see movement toward them. People traveling in family groups with everything they could fit into vehicles. Others arriving with almost nothing, on the charity of those who had arrived early and prepared generously. Those who arrive early will have every advantage, he explained. Land in these regions is still available at prices that reflect ordinary real estate logic rather than crisis pricing. Communities can be built with time to make mistakes and correct them before survival depends on getting everything right. Those who wait until crisis forces their hand will arrive as refugees. Both will survive if they maintain faith, but one path is significantly harder than the other, and the difference is entirely the timing of the decision. I watched the communities taking shape in the vision. People from different denominations, different theological traditions, different backgrounds, united by a single shared commitment to not accepting what was coming, regardless of what it cost them. Disagreements existed. They were secondary. The primary shared reality was, we will not cross this line. We will support each other in not crossing it. This is what I have always wanted, he said, and his voice held both grief for what had not been and hope for what was forming. Not institutions and programs and organizations competing for position, just people who love me and therefore love each other. The tribulation will remove everything that was decorative and leave only what is real. The worship I saw in those communities was unlike anything I have experienced in 23 years of attending services, while my mind ran through the following week's cases. People with nothing left to protect, no reputation for rationality to maintain, no professional identity dependent on not appearing too devoted. Just people who had given everything and discovered that what they received in return was worth incomparably more. Healings happened among them in ways I could not account for with any clinical framework. The presence of something genuinely holy was as palpable as a change in barometric pressure. Why is it so different there? I asked. Because necessity creates the kind of dependence that makes genuine experience possible, he said. When human systems have failed completely and divine provision is the only operational option, People finally receive what I have been offering throughout their entire comfortable lives when they were too busy managing their comfort to notice. I never wanted people who add faith to an already full life as a weekend supplement. I wanted people who stake everything on my faithfulness and discover that it holds. The final image I saw before the light began to shift was the moment of return, the sky opening, the trumpet, believers from the refuge regions and from scattered impossible positions all over the world, rising towards something that resolved every question I had ever carried about whether any of this was real. The suffering ending, the reward beginning in a way that made every sacrifice of the preceding period seem, in retrospect, almost absurdly small by comparison. Every sacrifice will be worth it, he said. Every hardship will dissolve into nothing, but they must hold. The pressure coming will be the most precisely designed pressure ever applied to human faith. It will find every weak point and apply force there specifically. Only those with roots that go all the way down will stand when everything else shakes. I felt something pulling me back. The brilliant environment beginning to fade, the ground becoming less solid, the light receding. His final words came with absolute clarity through the dissolving. Tell them the refuge states are prepared. Tell them the timeline is set. Tell them that faithfulness will be rewarded and that compromise will cost. Everything that cannot be replaced. Most importantly, tell them I am coming and they need to be ready. Then I was back inside a body that was in tremendous pain. Voices using medical terminology I recognized precisely. The sensation of CPR compressions, the weight of a defibrillator charge. My eyes opened to lights far less interesting than what I had just been looking at. A paramedic's face very close to mine, saying something about 11 minutes, about readings that were not consistent with recovery, about this being unexpected. I knew exactly what had happened. I knew exactly why. That was 4 days ago. I have spent these 4 days in the hospital they took me to, and then in my apartment after I signed the discharge paperwork against my cardiologist's explicit recommendation. He wanted more monitoring. I understand his clinical reasoning completely. I have given patients the same advice. I had different things to do with my time. I have been writing down everything I was shown in the same systematic way I write clinical notes, because some things need to be documented precisely before the passage of time softens the details. These details have not softened. I do not believe they will. Some things get written into you at a level deeper than memory. My medical training helps me understand some of the physical mechanisms of what I was shown. Pandemic dynamics, supply chain vulnerabilities, the social psychology of compliance under fear conditions, the existing technological infrastructure for digital identification and tracking. None of this is speculative. The framework for everything I was shown already exists. What is coming is not the creation of something new. It is the deployment of something already built, using circumstances that will make the deployment feel necessary and compassionate, rather than coercive. I do not know why I was the one shown this. I am a doctor, not a pastor. I am more comfortable with clinical evidence than prophetic language. Perhaps that is precisely the point. The scholars will complicate it. The theologians will debate the eschatological framework while the window closes. I will tell you what I was shown in the plainest language I have. A new illness is coming, beginning late spring of this year, 2026.